Welcome to another episode of Your Inner Voice podcast. What would you do if doing the right thing meant risking everything you love? Your safety, your freedom, even your life. Most of us want to believe we do the right thing. But when the pressure hits, when society demands silence, when fear creeps in, when comfort whispers in our ear, it's not that easy. Dietrich Bonhoeffer knew this battle well. He was a quiet man, not a warrior, not a politician, just a pastor and a thinker. But he made one of the loudest stands in one of the darkest times in human history. He stood up to the Nazis when almost everyone else stayed silent, and for that, he was arrested, imprisoned, and eventually executed. But this isn't a history lesson. This is about something deeper. Bonhoeffer's story is really about courage. Not the kind that roars, but the kind that whispers, "I can't stay silent anymore." It's about standing for something, even when the ground underneath you is shaking. And it's a story we all need, especially today. Because maybe you're not fighting a dictatorship, but maybe you're fighting your own silence. Maybe you've been holding back what you believe, hiding who you are, or avoiding something you know you're meant to do. Bonhoeffer's life shows us what it means to live with integrity and how terrifying and freeing that really is. He grew up in a privileged, educated family. He could have easily stayed in comfort. He could have looked the other way like many others did, but something inside him wouldn't let him. He once said, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil." And he lived by that, even when it cost him everything. There's something powerful about that kind of clarity, that inner compass, that voice inside that says, "This is who I am, and this is what I must do." That's not just moral courage, that's psychological strength. Bonhoeffer struggled with fear. He questioned himself. He wasn't immune to doubt. He was human. But he didn't let fear decide for him. He didn't wait for fear to disappear before he took action. That's one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves, that we need to feel brave before we can be brave. But Bonhoeffer proved something else. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite the fear. He knew that doing nothing was still a choice, that staying silent was still a message, and he refused to let his silence support something he knew was wrong. How often do we do that without realizing? How often do we stay quiet to protect our image, to avoid discomfort, to be accepted? We're told to play it safe, to fit in, to not rock the boat. And sometimes we lose ourselves in the process. Bonhoeffer didn't play it safe. He chose to be honest, even when it isolated him. And that's something a lot of us struggle with today. The fear of rejection, the fear of judgment, the fear of being alone if we speak our truth. But what's the cost of staying quiet? What's the cost of not showing up as who you really are? Bonhoeffer's story teaches us that the price of silence can be heavier than the price of courage. He believed that your life should match your values, that your actions should reflect your beliefs, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. He didn't just talk about sacrifice, he lived it, not because he wanted to be a hero, but because he couldn't betray his own soul. He was offered freedom, a way out. He could have escaped and lived in safety, but he chose to go back. He returned to Nazi Germany knowing the risk because he believed that his place was with those who were suffering. That kind of decision comes from deep inner strength, and here's where it connects to you. You might not be facing a dictatorship, but you're still facing choices every day. Choices to speak up or stay silent, to be real or perform for others, to follow your purpose or choose the easier path. We all want meaning. But meaning doesn't come from comfort. It comes from alignment, from being able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, "I stood for something." And yes, that's scary, because doing what's right doesn't always feel good at first. Sometimes it brings conflict. Sometimes it brings loss. But Bonhoeffer teaches us that the reward is a kind of inner peace the world can't touch. A kind of freedom that comes not from escaping pain, but from knowing that you didn't run from your truth. He once wrote, "When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. Now, whether you're religious or not, that line hits hard, because we all face small deaths in order to grow. The death of our ego, the death of our image, the death of being liked by everyone. And in return, we gain something greater: integrity, peace, and a deeper sense of purpose. So let me ask you, where in your life are you staying silent when you need to speak? Where are you playing small because you're afraid of what others will think? Where are you betraying your own values just to stay comfortable? Bonhoeffer didn't set out to be inspirational. He simply chose not to betray what he believed. And that's what makes his story so powerful. We live in a world full of noise, full of pressure to conform, full of fear and distraction. And in the middle of it all, we need voices that remind us who we really are. Voices like Bonhoeffer's. He reminds us that doing what's right doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's a quiet decision made in solitude, a simple refusal to go along with something that doesn't sit right in your soul. Those decisions shape your life more than you realize. Because every time you choose truth over convenience, every time you act from values instead of fear, you build a stronger version of yourself. You build a life you won't regret. Bonhoeffer's motivation wasn't glory, it wasn't fame, it was conscience, it was love for truth, it was the refusal to live a lie. And that kind of motivation is something we all need to cultivate. So what does Bonhoeffer teach us, really? That strength isn't about force. That bravery isn't about being fearless. That purpose isn't found in comfort. That truth matters more than popularity. That silence, too, is a choice, and a dangerous one. He reminds us that even in the darkest times, one voice, one life, one decision can still matter, and that living with integrity, even quietly, is one of the most powerful things you can do. So if you're feeling stuck, if you're torn between what's easy and what's right, if you've been hiding a part of yourself to stay safe or accepted, remember this: you don't need to be fearless. You don't need to be loud. You just need to be honest with yourself. And when you start living from that place, even if it's scary, you'll discover something most people never find: peace that can't be shaken. Bonhoeffer didn't get to see the end of the war, but his words, his choices, and his spirit lived far beyond him. And that's the kind of legacy worth leaving. Not because he was perfect, but because he was real. He chose the hard path, the honest path. And through that, he gave the world something unshakable, a reminder of what it means to be fully alive. So maybe the most powerful thing you can do right now isn't to win a battle or shout louder than the crowd. Maybe it's simply this: to stop running, to stop hiding, to start listening to the voice inside you that knows what's right, and to act on it, even if it's hard. Because in the end, that's what real motivation is. Not hype, not noise, but quiet conviction. The kind that shapes your life from the inside out. And that, more than anything, is what Bonhoeffer's story gives us. A reminder that the strongest kind of power is the one that starts within.